and fulfilled in terms of understanding what's going on. But also just in terms of being able to answer questions directly, I think it's a much more fulfilling way of doing it. And it's something that, again, helps cut costs because you're not relying on outside counsel, which, you know, we will engage them for certain components of an assessment. You know, if we decide that we want to have that opinion of counsel for whatever reason, we will of course go that route, and we will, you know, give them the evidence that we've acquired, and we'll have them give a third party opinion of it. But by having most of the work being done internally, it feels like that's how in-house counsel should be using their time, as opposed to just being this connecting thread of identifying the correct people. Every company is going to be different depending on what's being asked of in-house counsel, but I'm of the opinion that it makes more sense for in-house counsel to be on the FTO, preserve the product side of things, and less on the pen to paper drafting side of things, given where the expertise and where the strategic thinking needs to lie.
Yeah, and I think
just one quick point, which is, I think what you just said is actually a really good data point for when you're asking for budget. You can go back and say, look, 5 years ago, we were having outside counsel do these studies for us, and it was costing us hundreds of thousands of dollars, and now I can have a tool to do this for much less. So I think just a little practice point. Marcia?
That's how we justified ROI, was by making that exact argument that Kavita just hinted at.
Yes.
Yeah, I was gonna say this is a perfect discussion to get into our next segment, which is going to be, you know, to talk about what is a workable practice, you know, look like, right? And you know, we talked about continuous monitoring, and we also talked about this trigger-based assessments that are sometimes driven by product milestones or the product team, or potentially, you know, maybe acquisitions, or, you know, and so forth, right? So we have to constantly, you know, do both. So if you could do 3 things, right, to keep your IT risk under control without adding headcount, what would they be?
I'll start with one thing, and then we'll see what that inspires. Because 3 things is,
it's a lot.
It's tough. Like the best thing would be add budget, right? That's the biggest and best thing, depending on how seriously you're willing to take this. But no, I think it's investing in tools. I think that for the cost of enterprise licensing to a lot of the vendors that, you know, I'm familiar with, it's a small percentage of the cost of adding headcount or the cost of involving outside counsel. And I think the best way to actually engage these vendors is to have, if not real projects in mind, then pet projects where you can go to them, get a demo that's very interesting, would love to get my hands on this and would love to try it out. And then you have projects where you can test it. The real best case scenario is to do like an A/B test of, this is the results of an assessment that we ran previously. Now let's compare it to the results that we get from a tool that's helping do claim charting, or a tool that's helping do landscape monitoring. I also think that you're better off looking at tools that are purporting to be very good at a single task, as opposed to a one-stop shop. Just because, again, the fine-tuning the expertise, the data, is going to be harder for a generic legal AI tool to be able to drill down and do all these very discrete IP tasks, because we all know what that means, but it's challenging to teach, to fine tune all these different aspects at once. So I think tooling, and by investing in tooling, I mean having a very set out RFI plan for how you're going to evaluate which tools work for you, so that you're not just buying a tool for the sake of buying a tool, but buying a tool to solve a very specific problem.
Yeah, I really like your thoughts on A/B testing, Keith, because it is something we have been doing specifically as we look at tools. Like, for instance, in the area of charting, we have humans that chart for us, outside counsel that does that work, and we have no intention to get rid of them or have them not do that process anymore. But it was very interesting to send the same patent to a tool and say, what kinds of charts do you produce, and what do you find, and and try out a couple of tools and really see the differences compared to the human as well. But then one of the things that we've found in moving forward is the tool may not get you to a 100% perfect chart, but it often finds material, publicly available material that could be used in proving and creating a chart that maybe the humans had not discovered yet. And so then you have the humans working with the with the results of a good tool, and then you're just going next level, right? So it's it's that human tool, human AI combined focus that can really get you to a level that just couldn't have been done prior to these tools existing.
Yeah, I want to just double click on this continuous monitoring point. Like depending on your business, I think thinking about doing that is really critical, because if you're waiting for a trigger item like product launch or certain amount of time passing, like it might be too late so you really want to think about whether that's what your approach should be. So putting that aside, I think actually on the AI tools, I'm a big fan of having two tools for the same job, because sometimes, like even in my day-to-day work, I have Gemini, I have G.AI, and I'll use both to come up with a response, and then I'll combine those two to come up with my own response. And it's so crazy to me how different sometimes the responses and strategies can be. So I think if you have the budget and can afford two tools for the same task, that can be a clever strategy as well. And then on top of for the adding headcount, one of the other topics we discussed was sometimes it's really hard to get headcount in legal or as patent headcount, but the product team may have lots of headcount. So maybe you can second one or two people there who are like technical experts and who can help you analyze the results of this continuous monitoring, because sometimes that can just be too much work, or like maybe you're in a company where you have 30 different products, and maybe you're not an expert in all the technical aspects of all those products. So having experts within the product team whose job it is to just support you can be a good strategy to keep IP risk under control while still maintaining privilege.
Yeah, that's a great point, Kavita. And I've often seen that sometimes happen in especially large organizations, right, where you have those technical resources available. Because one thing that you can do is to do, a triage, right, internally before you take that step of having to engage additional legal resources to, to analyze everything, right? Because there are all these filings out there. And another thing too that begs the question is, when you have these technical resources, how do you control that the engineers a little bit, right? How do you make sure that they are not out there searching things and potentially giving you spreadsheets of thousands of patents, and now legal has to put in the work and doing the due diligence in making sure that you identify the signals, and distinguishing the noise, right? So I think that's those are all interesting points there, and I think for the three of you, like how do you manage that? How do you manage your more sophisticated IP, the people in your technical teams that they really think, or they have this understanding of IP and they want to kind of help you, but at the same time sometimes their help adds additional work for you.
Well, one of the techniques that I've seen very successful, I didn't create this technique, but I saw it at companies I've been, is kind of like a mentor or buddy technique, where a senior engineer who has been through the patent process many times then mentors a new engineer or a new inventor, right? So it's they're talking to a peer, an engineer, not legal, because legal resources tend to be limited. So that I think that's been a very successful program I've seen at companies.
Yeah, and I think we talked a little bit about this, right, Keith? I mean, you mentioned that sometimes you try to potentially operationalize the IP awareness directly into this product workflows, into the engineering reviews, and so forth, right? So, and you mentioned in the beginning, right, the idea that you need to move from reactive to proactive, right? So, so how do you try to scale, right, your human judgment without scaling headcount? I think that's definitely a challenge. Yeah.
I just wanted to add on to another component. I think it goes I think we're all assuming, training and education are happening in order to inform your engineers or your technical teams, or however you want to frame it, of why them directly searching for patents creates problems. I found that when you actually explain the kind of the reasoning behind it, that there's more buy-in to it. And then you can also explain, like, if they're using, we have people who are staying on the cutting edge of what's being published in, archive, bioarchive, that type of thing. Like, you can help them find ways to get information, to get research that won't turn up patents intentionally, right? You can only use Google Scholar, not end up in Google Patents. You can show them, don't look at WIPO searches. Like that's you're not going to find anything helpful there if you're trying to avoid this engineering teams discovering patents that they may not have the context for, right? But there's also, like, if everyone has access to Gemini, or everybody has access to a ChatGPT or a Claude with search capabilities, include in the prompts, right? Prompt engineering, you can say, don't return results that include patents. And like, whether or not it'll listen is one thing, but at least you can, like, go through the exercise, right, of explaining why you're doing this, and have that be part of, we do a regular IP training of all the very important things about preserving privilege, confidentiality, trade secrets. And one of those is sort of the sanitization of, like, why going out and looking for patents if you're going to submit an invention disclosure, like, tell us what you know, but don't go out and look for it. And why we're doing that tends to land better than just a direct command.
Yeah, that's great. And I think, maybe we can, talk about, this idea of, using the IP risk assessment to, to shift your strategy a little bit from, potentially you're doing it for defensive purposes to maybe offensive purposes, because I think it's, we talked a lot about the operational side of things, right? But how have you used this continuous monitoring and potentially the trigger assessments, right, to drive a decision, whether it's informing a filing, identifying those white spaces, blocking competitors, and so forth?
Oh, I think that's definitely a useful thing, especially from new tools, and these analyses in general, even in old style. If you have a good practice where you are continuously monitoring and paying attention to what your competitors are doing, and if those actions are actually infringing your own patents, right? Or if you can prove that from charting, then if you have a chart that's not quite there, for instance, because there's some element that you're unable to prove, file a continuation, right? Or file a new patent in sort of similar space. It can really inform you as a healthy company to make sure that you have, proper and effective patents if you should ever need to assert them.
Yeah, and I think, the value for me, when I was inside operating companies, of doing, the value of doing these risk assessments and FTO, right? It's not just defensive clearance, right? It has always been in my mind about strategic positioning, right? And using this continuous monitoring to really get a pulse for where your competitors are going, right? Where's the technology clustering? Where is it not? And getting a lot of insights that you may get from shifting the signals through the noise, right? And I think once you identify that, and that may open up areas in which you see potential gaps and potential white spaces, right? That you can then use that as strategic finding opportunities, right? And and leveraging, potential adjacent areas, right? That it's may not be core functionality, maybe be, a way to, to potentially, confuse the market a bit about what you are doing, right? As a company, right? So shaping the strategy based on the signals, I always found that to be very valuable. ultimately, right? Because it's all about understanding where your competition is going, whether that, where they are building that fine density, right? And figuring out where people are, expanding commercially at the same time, where you are trying to do that and sending signals to your competition or where potentially you're not doing it, right? So I think it's all fascinating. That's why I love, being in IP, because it has all these complex scenarios in technology, business, and law, where you're learning something new every day, right? So, and it's not just about avoiding problems, right, and managing risks. I think it's really thinking about the strategic positioning, right, and building into your roadmap, building into your product differentiation and so forth, and really that interaction, the case that you talked about, right, and all of you, Elizabeth and Kavita, right, that it's so important for in-house counsel to be integrated and embedded with your R&D teams. So,
And I just
you
want to
know,
add, sorry,
yeah,
this slide to me, I think, is so important, because here's where, as a patent attorney, you go from sort of like enterprise risk management to creating corporate value, right? And
yeah.
if you're doing this type of work, if you're not doing it, you should start doing it. If you're doing it, this is the kind of work you need to present to your leadership so that they understand how valuable, how freaking hard it is what we do, and how valuable it is to the company. Because those assets you're creating, I mean, maybe they're blocking competitors, maybe it's something you sell down the road. Like, you're creating so much corporate value.
Absolutely. And do you find that has it become easier as boards and leadership, business leadership, get more aware of IP and all these complexities around it? Have you found it easier to justify to them the budget that you need to to execute on the strategy that you lay out for them, and framing it as adding value?
Well, I mean, it's like one step forward, two steps back for me, because I recently had to have a conversation with our chief product officer, who said, in this age of AI, do we even need patents? Where the software space and the software can change so quickly, and AI can just write it, right? And I understand his point. But so yeah, for me, it's Anyway, I'll let Elizabeth and Keith comment.
I'm just worried about you, Kavita. Oh no. Maybe we don't need software patents.
Yeah, that's where I'm okay, because I'm a generalist at Coupa, but
and some things I've heard at other conferences that I've been to discuss is like, should there be something different than the traditional patent, like for software, right? Do we need something that lasts a shorter period of time, or is easier to achieve, a sort of a petty patent style, or styles that we sometimes have in other countries in these spaces, right? Back to sort of the bigger picture, I think some of the things Marsha was saying, right? You can if you're proactive and you have buy-in, I have good buy-in from my management about the importance of patents, luckily for me. But being, instead of just being the company or the department that says, send me your ideas when you have them, and then I will file them, what invention disclosures came, if you can also be proactive because of the tools, and going out and talking to your engineers that are doing things in the space that would be valuable to the company long term, right? Because it's an area they might be moving into, or it's an area that is looking critical for the current products, and maybe we need a little bit more there. Those are the kinds of things that I think savvy patent attorneys should be doing for their company.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And and let's talk again about the AI, right? So, because Kavita, you had a conversation with your chief product officer. What other conversations? What is the pulse in your companies about AI accelerating everything and changing everything? Is that making people, are people getting nervous about IP risks, or are they relaxing a little bit more?
I think it's viewed as an opportunity. It's another axis on which to consider all of your strategic thinking. And so I think it's less of a, I think there is less thinking right now about what risks are we going to step into because of using AI to boost productivity. We're thinking about risks in terms of, everyone is thinking about risk in terms of like what exposure are we going to have because of AI. But from a product acceleration, what risks are we getting into? I think that is something that is only the quote unquote lucky few of us are thinking about. But I think it is being viewed as a huge opportunity to accelerate, and we're being strongly encouraged to really think hard about how we can make that acceleration be something that's beneficial and long lasting.
I 100% agree with you, Keith. It's interesting because, even though I had that conversation with our chief product officer, our board actually, asked me about what are the patents that we have in the AI space, because I'm at a B2B SaaS company and we are in this like AI transformation, right, for the last 2 years. And like, in order to survive, like we need to be viewed as an AI company, right? So, and having the patents, and we've used machine learning for a long time. We've had patents that, on machine learning uses, and now generative AI uses. So it's like, it's an opportunity for sure. Like our business depends on it.
Great.
There's so many ways in which AI affects things. I know Keith and I were just at this conference last week where everybody was talking about like everybody's getting more disclosures just because people can write patent ideas up and submit them more easily, right? It solves the white page problem for all sorts of issues, but certainly also for disclosures, right? But then there's so many other uses. You can do searches. There are AI tools out there that help you do invention discovery, right? There are AI tools out there that help you chart the white spaces in your space. I mean, I think the very first, companies in the AI space were searching, right? Were prior art searching, right? So, and now they're writing applications. You can decide how well you think they're doing on that. But I've definitely heard people at the conference I went to say like, provisional applications could be a good use. Another thing that I think is interesting is should we all be doing more publications, right? Publications don't have quite the requirements that patents do. So maybe when you, in the past, maybe we didn't do as many publications because we just didn't have the bandwidth. But if you use an AI tool to help you publish things that you want to put out there for the world and then protect yourself from having somebody else patent in that space and block you, it's, there's some room there too. And certainly that's very proliferated, right? We know there's so much more data and writings out there now that AI can write things.
Yeah, that's great.
I have one more alternative strategy of ways of thinking about AI, because I think we're into the starting to go into the unknown, right? I'm imagining a future where, as part of your monitoring, you're going to be looking at how keywords are matching and looking at claim coverage and things like that, but also using tools to assess, how confident are we that this was written largely by AI, to understand, like, is this a junk patent where it's looking at the claims, looking at the risk associated with it, but also looking at, like, does this text show the hallmarks of being AI generated? And so how seriously should we take it because of that? So I can imagine a future where that's going to be another component that's read out to, again, all go into the big bowl of soup that is your risk profile of any given asset.
Yeah, that's great. And I think, we're 5 minutes away. So before we wrap up, what's the one thing you want, the audience here to remember when they get out of this webinar, and take one learning away from this so we can all do better at our risk management?
Start looking at AI tools. I feel like, the conference I went to last week was all about, like, are you using AI effectively? And if you aren't, what else can you do? And can you get approval for a tool? Maybe if you can't get approval for headcount, for instance, there might be some space there. We all have different risks and we all have different budgets, but, do what you can, for sure.
if you're doing this level of work at your company, you are highly valuable to make sure to do some, make sure to get the visibility that you need. Do self-promotion and show the company the value of what you're doing.
Yeah, and when you're getting ready to experiment with these tools, I think that just make sure that you know that the agreements that you have with the providers, with the vendors, you're doing the privileged things and the confidentiality preserving things correctly. I think that there are plenty of discussions to be found as to how to get that baseline correct, so that once you have the baseline and once you have the tool in place, you can experiment, you can play around to understand what works best for you, because your work style, your workflows, and your corporate environment are going to create different scenarios than anyone else. And so the only way to get there is to experiment. There's no, one and done solution.
Yeah, that's great, and I love this idea of AI tools because I sit in in a company that is building an AI solution, but I think that for me the advice would be to really embed yourself in your product engineering teams, your business teams, have that visibility and the interaction, develop that trust. And I think the companies that will navigate this new phase best are not necessarily the ones that will add more budget, will add more headcount, right? They will be the ones that will leverage AI efficiently, smartly, and do more with less. And I think that's the environment we're in. Learn how to do more with less, and I think you will get there.
Fantastic.
So I think with that, we may have some questions.
Absolutely. So we'll start the audience Q&A now. We have a few minutes left. We've got quite a few questions actually. So we'll start with this one. Has anybody had a chance to compare results of FTO search done by a search firm with FTO search by a generic or a specialized AI search tool? So I suppose comparing the firm to an AI search tool that's been sort of specially developed.
We haven't done a head-to-head comparison where we send basically the same request one to a vendor that says, I mean, we've had vendors that say we don't use AI as like that's their selling point, right? Is that they have efficiencies in other ways. So we've engaged with them and we tried them and we've done certain tasks with them. We've done certain tasks with just AI with no like that we are the human in the loop. I think different queries have different results. I can't really give a definitive, this one is better than the other. It really depends on your technology, the context that you need, and how quickly you're able to distill these concepts down, and whether that works better with a prompt or whether that works better with a human conversation. So it's unfortunately, for me, it's the classic answer.
Yeah, I haven't done it in the search context, but I have, as I alluded to earlier in this discussion, I have done it in the charting context. My general attitude is the experts that have worked on our patents for a long time, charting them against all our competitors, are better than the first pass that a very good tool does. But a very good tool may inform the experts on collateral they were otherwise unaware of. So I think it's a good combo.
Fantastic. I think we've got time for one more. And this person says, I'm basically the only IP or legal person at a 200-person company, and the product keeps asking for FTO reads every sprint. How do I keep up without becoming the no person?
I think we've answered that, right? So get a tool, monitor continuously, and so that every time you're looking, monitor continuously based on assigner and the CPC code, maybe even inventor, and then you're not doing a full like search every sprint. You're looking just at the incremental information you got every over time.
Yeah, and the only thing that I'll add to that, which very well said, Kavita. The only thing I'll add is if you have the opportunity to ever get ahead of the product, so understanding what people are, not what they're shipping, but what they are building towards, so that if you ever are able to get your head a little bit above water, that you can kind of stay ahead of the curve and potentially help influence the product, so that you're not saying no, but you're saying here are the other ideas. that's a potential approach as well.
Yeah, and to that I would say, like, if you're going to get ahead and actually say, oh, look, competitor A is starting to be in this white space, like we should, what is our strategy? Like then you become a really then you'll really become really valuable to the product team.
It
From
looks
defense
like so sorry guys, but we have done an amazing job. It looks like that's all we have time for today. So I'd love to thank our amazing panelists and our fantastic audience for joining us. Thank you very much to Tradespace for collaborating with us. We hope you had a great time on this webinar, because we certainly did.